What is going on, guys? Grave here today. I'd like to talk about the Templar changes coming in update 46 to the Elder Scrolls Online. And now, of course, as I mentioned in the last video talking about the Dragon Knight changes, there's a lot of changes coming to each class because of subclassing. Some things have to get nerfed, some things have to get buffed, and we're just going to kind of have to see how this plays out as the public test server kind of goes forward over the next several weeks. When it comes to the Templar, Aedric Spear Puncturing Strikes. This ability and its morphs now deal damage to the 6 closest enemies rather than having no target. These abilities no longer deal normal damage to the closest enemy and then deal lesser damage to the other enemies hit. They now deal full damage to all targets hit, up to the new cap of 6. Each enemy snared rather than only the first. Now, the developer comments that with subclassing now in place, we're placing a target cap on the ability in efforts to prevent it from becoming too dominant. To make sure the skill is still viable, we're removing the reduced damage against other nearby enemies hit so it stands out as a unique and powerful skill that serves a purpose, focusing on immense cleave damage. When it comes to puncturing sweeps, they reduce the healing done by this morph by 25% of the damage done, down from 33%. This will result in less healing against one enemy while being almost the same against 2 and increasing greatly at 3+ enemies. Note that the heal from this morph was always capped at 6 enemies hit, so that part remains unchanged. So now on a single target, you're not going to get as near as much, almost 10% less healing from puncturing sweeps. Biting jabs, this morph now has an increased chance per hit, 10% per enemy rather than 3%, to apply sunder rather than increasing the damage of the lesser hit, as it now deals full damage to all targets. Burning light, the passive now scales off 25 and 50% of your weapon and spell damage rather than 21 and 42 of your weapon and spell damage, and 2 and 4% of your magic and stamina. Increase the status effect chance per hit to 10%, up from 3%. So Burning Light got a pretty good buff there. Spear Wall, the passive now grants minor berserk and protection for 6 seconds after activating an Aedric Spear ability rather than only minor protection. Piercing Spear buffed the passive increase to critical damage and damage done to blocking players to 6 and 12%, up from 5 and 10%. Spear Shards increase the damage of the residual damage over time effect from this ability and the Luminous Shards morph by 23% to make up for the 1 second delay this ability has. Luminous Shards, this morph now also allows the caster to be eligible for their own synergy. Blazing Spear decreased the damage from the initial hit of this morph by 23%, increased the residual damage over time effect by 53%. This will result in a 10% damage increase for the entire ability if the enemy remains inside the area for the full duration. Now that's kind of interesting because Blazing Spear has seen some changes over time. That is a pretty good buff, but you're going to have to keep that enemy inside of that area or that radius. Sometimes it's kind of hard in game, as we know things move around. Now if you do have someone tanking, or if it's one of those more static style enemies that don't move around a lot, this would be pretty handy now that it get a bit of a buff. Dawn's Wrath Backlash, the final hit of this ability and its morphs no longer miss some enemies. And Radiant Destruction, they increase the time this ability can be channeled to 4.8 seconds, up from 1.8 seconds, to reduce the need to constantly activate the skill. This ability and its morphs now cost 1,157 magic per tick, rather than having an upfront cost of 2950. So your upfront cost is going to be, of course, kind of reduced there with it now counting as magic per tick, to ensure it drains resources closer to other execute abilities while still remaining cheaper than others, since it's far more kind of restrictive. Increase the damage per tick of this ability's morph by 12% and adjusted the execute scaling now to start at 30% health and gaining up to 500 bonus damage rather than starting at 50 health and gaining up to 480 bonus damage. This ability and its morphs are now dodgeable in efforts to help prevent it from being a complete death sentence at low health and, of course, PvP areas. That is pretty interesting. Most people, always use executes at anywhere, I would say, between 25 and 30%, some at 20%. So now having a bit of a increase in the tick of this ability and having that 500 bonus damage at now starting at 30% health would be a pretty good execute still for the Templar. The beam's still going to be definitely there if you like to use the Templar class. And of course, Radiant Glory, this morph now reduces the base cost to 771 per tick, 33% cheaper, rather than restoring a small chunk of magic per tick based on missing health. Increase the healing done to 20% of the damage done per tick, up from 17. Radiant Oppression, this morph now causes the execute scaling to begin at 39% health, rather than increasing the execute scaling bonus damage by 20%. Restoring Light, Healing Ritual, the ability and its morphs no longer ignore line of sight. The passive now increases for mending, now increases all of your healing done up to 13% based on your target's missing health, rather than only increasing your Restoring Light ability. Healing done up to 12% based on their missing health. Light Weaver, this passive now causes you to automatically block all attacks at no cost for 2 seconds when you start any channel or cast time ability, up to once every 30 or of course 15 seconds there, /15 seconds. This passive no longer grants 16,500 armor and channeling the Rite of Passage. This passive will now attempt to activate if you already have a form of automatic block active, such as Shield Wall. Now when it comes to pretty much the Templar in general, there's a lot more changes here, as you can see, than there was in the past video I made about the Dragon Knight. I'd say the biggest ones here are probably going to be Puncturing Sweeps, Biting Jabs, Burning Light, and Luminous Shards, all seeing some nerfs and buffs there. Of course, the changes, of course, for the execute, the beam, Radiant Destruction, Radiant Glory. Overall, I still think Templar is going to be pretty viable. You can combine this one skill line of a Templar class in Update 46 with subclassing with some of the other classes we have in game, and I think you're going to have a pretty potent damage dealing character. And I think there's going to be a lot of options here for tanking and healing as well. So leave me a comment with your thoughts about the changes to the Templar in Update 46. And of course, if you like the video, hit the like. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.